You got all those books, the Bible, you've got the different Gospels and stuff that people are quite familiar with. Half the time, they didn't even need to read the subtitles. They could look at it and know what was going on.
What if one of the most controversial films ever made was only telling you half the story? When The Passion of the Christ hit the world, it shook audiences to their core. The raw emotion, the intensity, the pain, it felt real, almost too real. But what if there were deeper layers hidden beneath the surface? Layers that most people never noticed, or were never meant to notice at all. In a recent jaw-dropping conversation, Joe Rogan was left visibly stunned as Mel Gibson opened up about the film in a way he never has before. Not just about the making of it, but about the meaning behind it, the symbolism, the unseen details, the parts that didn't make it into the final cut, and why. This isn't just about a movie anymore. It's about the hidden messages woven into every frame, messages that challenge what we think we know. And once you start connecting the dots, it becomes hard to ignore, like a puzzle, slowly revealing a much bigger picture. Because sometimes the truth isn't hidden. It's right in front of us. We just don't see it. If this kind of content opens your eyes, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more mind-blowing revelations. The story nobody wanted. Told to really understand what Mel Gibson revealed, you have to go back to the beginning. Because The Passion of the Christ was never meant to be just another religious movie. He wasn't trying to impress people with grand visuals or a polished Hollywood style. He wanted something that hits you hard, something that makes you feel every moment instead of just watching it. For him, this story wasn't about the past. It was about all of us. The idea was simple but heavy. This wasn't just one man's suffering long ago. It was a sacrifice connected to every human being. That's the message he wanted people to sit with, even if it made them uncomfortable. Gibson didn't take this lightly. He spent years studying the four Gospels, going line by line through the final hours of Jesus' life. But he didn't stop there. He explored older writings, deeper interpretations, and spiritual ideas that most filmmakers would avoid. He wasn't just showing events. He was trying to show the unseen weight behind them, the emotional struggle, the inner battle, and the purpose hidden inside the pain. Right from the opening scene, the tone is clear. The Garden of Gethsemane feels heavy and tense. Jesus is alone in prayer while his closest followers drift off to sleep. You can feel the pressure building, like the world itself is closing in. Then comes a quiet but powerful moment. Darkness, doubt, and a symbolic confrontation that connects all the way back to the beginning of humanity's story. Nothing in this film is random. Every scene, every shadow, every word is placed with intention. This isn't a movie you casually watch in the background. It pulls you in and forces you to face something deeper, something bigger than yourself. What Hollywood tried to bury. During his conversation with Rogan, Gibson revealed something that most people never talk about openly, something that explains why this film faced such extraordinary resistance from the very beginning. He noticed a pattern within the industry, a double standard that operated silently but effectively. Films exploring various religious traditions often received respectful treatment, nuanced portrayals, careful handling. But when it came to Christian stories, the response was fundamentally different. Skepticism, dismissal, sometimes outright hostility. Christianity is the one religion that you're allowed to disparage. Yeah. Christianity is the one religion where they'll embrace all these different religions until it comes to Christianity. Projects were labeled old-fashioned, too serious, out of touch with modern audiences. the assumption was always that nobody wanted to see this kind of content anymore. Gibson experienced this resistance personally and painfully. Studios that should have been fighting to finance a project from an Oscar-winning director suddenly went cold. Phone calls went unanswered. Meetings were cancelled. Colleagues who had worked alongside him for years started keeping their distance. The message couldn't have been clearer. This particular story wasn't welcome, and neither was the filmmaker trying to tell it. The industry didn't just doubt the commercial viability, they actively opposed the content itself. But Gibson refused to walk away. His Catholic upbringing meant this wasn't just professional ambition. It was personal mission. When traditional funding dried up, he financed the project himself. He assembled a team of believers who shared his vision and weren't intimidated by controversy. What emerged from that crucible of opposition shocked everyone. The Passion of the Christ became one of the highest-grossing R-rated films in history, proving that millions of viewers were starving for exactly the kind of bold, uncompromising storytelling that Hollywood executives insisted nobody wanted. Supernatural events that defied explanation. The making of this film was anything but ordinary. What Gibson shared with Rogan moved into territory that sounds almost impossible to believe. Events occurred on set that the crew still cannot explain to this day. Jim Caviezel, cast as Jesus, endured genuine physical suffering that translated to the screen in ways no special effects could replicate. The cross he carried weighed over 30 pounds. During one take, it dislocated his shoulder completely. During the scourging scene, he was struck twice by the actual whips, once so hard it knocked the wind from his lungs, leaving his hands bleeding and raw. His pain wasn't performance, it was absolutely real. And that authenticity bleeds through every frame of the finished film. Then came the lightning. Assistant director Gian Michelini was struck twice during filming. Caviezel himself was reportedly struck during the crucifixion scene, yet walked away miraculously unharmed. The Passion, while I was electric, struck by lightning on the last shot of the movie, but prior to that, it was shoulder dislocation. Lightning, in biblical tradition, represents divine power and judgment. It appears at pivotal moments throughout Scripture. The crew couldn't explain what was happening around them. These incidents created an atmosphere where the boundary between natural and supernatural felt dangerously thin. People started wondering if something beyond ordinary filmmaking was taking place. Transformations extended beyond the physical realm. Luca Lionello, who portrayed Judas Iscariot, entered production as an atheist. By the time filming wrapped, he had become a believer, profoundly changed by spending months exploring themes of betrayal and redemption. Maya Morgenstern, who played Mary, was secretly pregnant during filming, a quiet symbol of life and death, resurrection and renewal, intertwined with the very story she was helping tell. Gibson also shared reports of unexplained healings. A young girl with severe epilepsy went an entire month without seizures after being present during filming. Others reportedly experienced restored senses. Whether these were divine interventions, remarkable coincidences, or psychological transformations, the cast and crew walked away, convinced they had participated in something far greater than a movie production. One scene perfectly captures Gibson's artistic vision. After the crucifixion, Jesus' body rests in Mary's arms, echoing Michelangelo's famous Pietà. The composition captures grief and grace simultaneously, devastation and dignity, human sorrow and divine purpose. It transcends religious tradition to speak to universal experiences of love, loss, and hope. Critics divided, audiences transformed. When The Passion of the Christ finally reached theaters, critical response was sharply divided. Roger Ebert, arguably the most influential film critic of his generation, awarded it a perfect 4 stars, calling it the most violent and intense film he had ever witnessed. Ebert wrote that he had never truly understood the depth of Christ's suffering until experiencing Gibson's unflinching portrayal. Roger Ebert, as much as he loved to praise and celebrate good films, he also loved to point out their flaws. Other respected critics praised the film's sincerity and artistic ambition, comparing Gibson's directorial vision to masters of spiritual cinema. Yet controversy arrived from multiple directions. Before the film's release, religious leaders reviewed the script and expressed serious concerns. They worried that certain portrayals could reinforce dangerous historical stereotypes that had fueled anti-Semitism for centuries. These weren't frivolous objections. History showed how such narratives had been weaponized to justify persecution and violence. Gibson maintained that his intent was to show humanity's collective responsibility for Christ's death, not to single out any group, but the debate highlighted how fraught any retelling of this story inevitably becomes. Scholars noted that Gibson included scenes without direct biblical basis, like Judas tormented by demonic children. Gibson's response was straightforward. This was artistic interpretation, meant to convey spiritual truths, not documentary recreation. He used cinematic language, symbolism, and visual metaphor to explore themes of guilt, redemption, and spiritual warfare. The film walked a tightrope between historical representation and theological meditation. Different viewers brought radically different expectations and left with radically different experiences. Some found it spiritually transformative. Others found it problematic. Almost nobody walked away neutral. The intensity of debate only amplified public interest. People who would never normally consider religious films felt compelled to judge for themselves. Church groups organized mass viewings. Religious leaders delivered sermons, analyzing its implications. Media outlets ran countless stories dissecting every frame. Gibson had created something that absolutely refused to be ignored. The Resurrection Project Gibson isn't finished exploring these themes. In fact, he's only getting started. During his interview with Rogan, he revealed that for 6 to 7 years, he and screenwriter Randall Wallace have been developing something even more ambitious, a film about the resurrection, told not through conventional linear storytelling, but as a cosmic exploration of the eternal battle between good and evil. Gibson described the project as incredibly ambitious. It spans from the fall of the angels to the death of the last apostle. This isn't a simple sequel. It's an expansion into territory that mainstream cinema has never truly attempted. Gibson wants to show how that singular moment in history, the resurrection, connects to everything before and after. He's diving into ancient texts, theological debates, and historical research to craft a narrative that challenges audiences to see familiar stories through entirely new eyes. For him, the Gospels aren't mythology. They're history, evidenced by the unwavering testimony of the apostles, all of whom died rather than deny what they witnessed. As Gibson asked Rogan directly, who dies for something they know is a lie? That question alone, he believes, validates the supernatural claims at the very heart of Christianity. The resurrection remains the most challenging aspect of faith for many people. Someone executed, buried, and then walking out of a tomb defies the natural order completely. Gibson admits that for much of his life, he accepted these claims because others believed them. But over time, he sought his own understanding. That personal journey now shapes everything he creates. He isn't interested in preaching to the converted or producing content that confirms existing beliefs. He wants skeptics and believers alike to wrestle with profound questions about existence, meaning, and what happens when life ends. What everyone missed. So what really shook Joe Rogan in that conversation with Mel Gibson? It wasn't one shocking moment or a single secret. It was the realization of everything behind the film hitting all at once, like pieces of a puzzle suddenly locking together. The truth is, the Passion of the Christ didn't come into the world easily. Gibson had to push against an industry that didn't fully support what he was trying to do. This wasn't a safe project. It wasn't designed to please everyone. It was risky, intense, and deeply personal. And sometimes, when something carries that much weight, it comes with experiences people can't easily explain. Moments during filming that cast and crew later described as strange, powerful, even unsettling. But the deeper truth goes beyond that. This film wasn't made just to entertain. It was made from belief, real belief, the kind that doesn't bend under pressure, the kind that asks something from you. It reminds us that not everything meaningful is comfortable, that sometimes speaking honestly means standing alone, that telling certain stories comes with a cost, and not everyone is willing to pay it. In a world where most things feel calculated, carefully designed for approval, views, and profit, this stood out. It showed that there are still people who create from conviction, not just strategy, and that kind of honesty hits differently. You can feel it. Gibson's journey reflects something rare today. He didn't play it safe. He didn't soften the message to make it easier to digest. He told the story the way he believed it needed to be told, even if it made people uncomfortable. Especially if it made people uncomfortable. And that's why the film still divides people even today. Some see it as powerful and deeply moving. Others struggle with its intensity. But that's what happens when something reaches deeper than the surface. It forces you to react. You can't just ignore it. What came out of that conversation wasn't just behind-the-scenes details. It was a reminder that every bold creation has a human story behind it, one filled with doubt, pressure, sacrifice, and the decision to keep going anyway. That's what most people missed. It was never just a film. It was one man putting everything on the line to tell a story many would rather avoid. And maybe the real truth is this: some stories aren't meant to make you comfortable. They're meant to change you.